join me in the Bluebird Project workshop for an update. There's been a bit of speculation, a little bit of news flying around about what's happening with our big blue boat, Bluebird K7, and it's been a long time since I did an update, and I thought now was probably about the right time. So, what's going on? It's nearly 2 years since we took the difficult decision to pass the baton to the Ruskin Museum and said, right, okay, show us what you're made of. So what has been done in all of this time? Well, nothing basically. Nothing of any consequence. The boat went away for a month in March, I think, to supposedly have an engine fitted. We said then that's not going to work, and it didn't. And there's still a lot of stuff which we can't explain. We sent small things first. We sent the wooden extensions for the launch and recovery cradle away with it. 6 bolts, put them on. It's purely cosmetic. It's to get the full 66, 67 look. But nobody's thought to put them back on. Where they've gone, absolutely no idea. There is one teeny event of note, and that is someone has finally, after all this time, fitted the spray baffles. Now the spray baffles are big acrylic guards that go down either side of the cockpit to keep the water out of the engine. Held on with a couple of dozen screws. It's about a half-hour job to put them on or take them off. We shipped them back with everything. They vanished. Didn't put them on. They've suddenly appeared. But it makes you wonder, who's running the show that they couldn't take half an hour out of their lives to do this months ago? Well, the excuse given was that, oh, they had to stay off while the canopy was measured. Well, that's rubbish, because the canopy was measured long since. They could have gone on and come off for the measuring and gone back on again. Like I say, half an hour, nobody did. But it gets worse, because when they measured the canopy, which didn't need to be measured at all, because they could have had a canopy, but I'll get to that. When they measured for the canopy, they took all the foam surround off the canopy opening. Well, that foam is for the most part original. It came out of the lake, glued to the wreckage, and we teased it off and cleaned it, and we glued it back on again. It's a proper historical artifact, part of the fabric of the boat. And when we stuck it on, it wasn't with a view it would ever have to come off, so it was stuck on thoroughly. Yet they've taken it off, so it's very unlikely it came off without any damage. But why on earth they took it off is a mystery, because it's essential to the proper fit of the canopy. It latches back and squidges into it, and it locks into place against that foam. What they've done is taken an essential part of getting the canopy to fit properly off and measured where it isn't. So that's going to make life very difficult to get a decent canopy fit. Why you would do that, no idea. But the baffles are on. Unfortunately, it's just a drop in the ocean of what needs to be done. So on the subject of canopies, as everybody knows, our canopy blew off on Loch Fad. It went 100 feet in the air allegedly, smashed itself to pieces, landed in the loch, and that's where it is now, because despite our best efforts as sonar equipment and divers, it's gone into the ooze. Now, it was a miracle none of it went through the engine, and we now understand why it came off. We engineered a problem in trying to make the cockpit waterproof for the pilot's feet. We also made it airtight, and we now understand completely why the canopy came off. So we then had to spend the following day building a scrap canopy from scrap bits to get us by, and then to try and keep it on. We put some bungees on it. Not a good answer. The problem with the canopy for running purposes is that it has to stay firmly on when you're running so as not to startle the pilot and put him in any danger. But it also has to come off easily if someone wants to leap out or if somebody has to get in to effect the rescue. We never solved that. We never really bottomed that problem. We never got the chance. So we had a few ideas. So it's going to be interesting to see how they solve that one. Because, of course, now they're talking of running it next year, which I will get back to. So when the Ruskin Museum pulled the rug from under our feet, we were most of the way through building new canopies. And it's quite an involved process. It's a vac-formed acrylic surface, but then it has a frame where it meets the boat. And the frames were the part we were working on. Now they said, oh, give us everything and leave with nothing. And that's essentially what happened. But we said, look, we're proud of our work. It doesn't have a canopy. We'll carry on because we're most of the way through this. And we'll make you a canopy because, you know, we're good people. And they went, no, we'll do it. All right. I mean, why would you? But anyway, that's what they chose to do. Then they came and asked us if they could borrow our CAD model for the surface. Of all the cheek. But we said, yeah, go on, do your worst. So they've had that best part of 2 years, and there is no canopy. And they're going to need a canopy for your display, because it has to look right, and the one we built was perfect. And they're going to need a canopy to run the thing, plus spares. Where are the canopies? So 2 years on, no canopy. Still waiting. But that's a small thing, because if they want to run it, they need an engine. And it doesn't have an engine. It's got some of an engine bolted in order to save face, but it's not connected to anything, and it doesn't work. Because originally they bought some Orpheus 803 engines, or they acquired them from somewhere, did no due diligence and discovered the hard way that they really do not fit. Different gearbox on the engine. So they would disappear to somewhere, and then they got an Orpheus 101, which is the engine that we used. But that doesn't fit either. It sort of nearly goes, but it still doesn't fit. There's dozens and dozens, possibly 100 modifications need to be made to get that to fit. They got very lucky in '66 with the Orpheus 701 because that pretty much goes. But the 101 doesn't. And we had to do a lot of work to make that go. And a lot of work that we did, the boat had no sides on. We could look in through the sides and work on it sideways. Not an option now. So the first thing I'm going to have to do there is put it back on the old fuel system. Now that we recovered, think of it as the fuel injection system for the engine. You've got the tubey bit with the fan blades in, and you've got the bit underneath that makes it all work, that delivers the fuel. We got the original one, the one that powered Campbell on the 4th of January '67, and we went to Rolls-Royce, who had taken over support of the Bristol engines, and said, please, 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 good people, would you rebuild this for us? Now, support had been withdrawn for that fuel system in the early 70s, and they basically said, we don't support it, but they very kindly came out of retirement and they rebuilt it. So that is a genuine part of the boat in full working condition, rebuilt by the original equipment manufacturer. It's historically significant. It's brand spanking new. The next nearest one is going to be half a century since it was taken apart and rebuilt. This one is new, with all new elastomers, all new O-rings, all new gaskets, all new sealants, rig tested, calibrated, brand new. Now, it would be a sin not to use it for that reason, because it is without question the safest one in the world. It would be a sin not to use it because that would be a kick in the teeth to the good people who gave up their lunchtimes and their evenings to rebuild it. But also, it will fit in the boat. So fitting that fuel system is an absolute no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. You know, it has to be done. So that's job one. That has to go on the engine. It'll have to be tested on the rig because once it's in the hull, there's no spanner access at all. So you've got to put it on the rig and get it leak-free and set up all the linkages because it has to work on the ends of the linkages that work the throttle and the high-pressure fuel cogs. And there's an ITV news clip where we couldn't get it started and there was fire coming out and it wouldn't go and it nearly went. And the reason it wouldn't go was because of the fine-tuning of those linkages. So all of that has to be done before the engine can go in. And another thing that needs to be done before the engine goes in is the hydraulic system needs a good going over because that stood dry for 2 years. And the hydraulic system is powered by the engine and it runs the water brake, which is a safety feature. Now, why would you not make sure you had all the safety features? You're going to run this violent 2.5-ton jet-powered priceless historical artifact. You're not going to send it out without its brakes. So the hydraulic system needs to be gone over. We always tested that with a remote pump and plumbed it in externally because, again, when you put the engine in, you've got no spanner access. If it leaks, it leaks. And you can't have it leak because this is another thing. In '67, '66, the engine just threw all its unwanted fluids straight overboard. The bilge pump pumped straight into the lake. The engine dumps went to a primitive sort of catch tank system and threw all of it into the lake. Now these engines, when they start up or shut down, they throw out quantities of waste fuel. Most of it comes from the combustion chamber because as the engine spools up, the fuel doesn't atomize to begin with, and then when it does atomize, the fire lights, and you've got all this liquid fuel in the bottom. Well, on the aircraft, it just throws it onto the tarmac. Doesn't matter. Flashes off, gone away. You can't do that in the boat because you have two problems. One, it's all swilling around in the bilge water, and if you're going to pump the bilges, you're going to have an oil slick like the Torrey Canyon behind you. And the other problem is, all that fuel swilling around in that confined space is a massive fire risk. And they knew this in '66 because when we dismantled the boat, there was all this really crude heat shielding made with bits of string and cheap aluminium sheet and noggins of wood to make a layer between the hot engine and the bilges because it was swimming with fuel and there was old shirts and rags stuffed in there, soaked in jet fuel. So you've got to make sure that all the waste fuel and any leaked fluids are collected up into a catch tank and they can be disposed of safely for environmental reasons, for fire risk. And we had just about got that setup working. Just on Butte, it was a bit of a cobbled together compromise, and we had to clean it out with a vacuum cleaner, but we had it working. But that all needs to be done before it can ever go out on the water. And then there's the not inconsiderable problem of starting the engine. Now, the old barrel engine was electric start, plug a battery and press the button, off it went. This engine, the Orpheus, is air start, and Bluebird had an air start system on, which was fairly primitive. It was only good for about 2 starts. It must have been a massive handicap back in the day. You just set out on your day's development work and you'd have to go ashore for 2 hours to charge the air start system. So we wanted to develop a new onboard air start system that would suit this engine, the 101. The 701 was a different air start, and we spent a lot of time on that, but by the time we went to Butte, it simply wasn't ready. We knew everything about it down to the last millimetre because we had test data from Haywards Heath in '66, and we completely rebuilt the original start system with the help of Goodrich control systems. So we knew everything about it, and we were able to match the performance of our air start system to this engine, to the old engine, to the old test figures. The problem was it wasn't ready in time for Butte. It just wasn't tested, safe, we didn't know enough about it. So we reluctantly went with off-board starting, which meant in this case having a separate boat with some starting bottles on, with the crew on, tethered to Bluebird with hoses and wires. The crew in the start boat couldn't see the pilot couldn't see the crew in the start boat. As soon as you start the engine, the boat moves. It won't start in neutral. So now you've got 2 boats tied together, one set off, big jet-powered thing, and another crew frantically trying to disconnect everything. And it was a 3-way semaphore exercise between the pilot, the control boat, and the start crew. And it was without question the diciest part of the whole thing. It had a lot of risk. There was a lot of danger involved in that. And we didn't like it, but we did it, we made it work. But we promised we'd not do it again. So when we got back, because we had dates to run the boat in 2019 on Coniston Water, we'll get back to that, first thing we did was sort out the onboard air start. Now there's talk of this boat running next year. And looking at this logically, there's 3 choices. Either design, build, develop, test, commission, learn about, train people up on a similar system in a short space of time. Not saying it can't be done, but that's one option. Second option is the obvious one, is to come and speak to the people who know how to do this, because we have all the equipment, the knowledge, the expertise, all the facts and figures and values and all of that stuff, and we can make it work. Or introduce a whole raft of unmitigated risk to the process. And while I'm on the subject of starting the engine, the starter, which is a little turbine that spins itself and then spins the main spool of the engine, lives under there, under this inlet bullet. Now, we spent a lot of time recovering and repairing the original one that came out of the lake. And if the truth be told, it was a component too far. We bit off a bit more than we could chew with that one, because it was 34 years underwater and it was knackered. It was badly corroded, it was rotted around where it was bolted in, it's rotted internally in void spaces you can't get at, and we had to do a colossal amount of work to get it so it would bolt to an engine and it would be alright. But every time we took it off, because you have to take it off to service the starter motor and do its oil levels, every time we took it off, we crack tested it, dye penetrant test, and every time it was cracked and coming apart, and every time it had to be welded. So it was very much tongue-in-cheek. And it was one of those things we thought, right, we'll run this for Butte, fingers and toes crossed. If it comes back unscathed, it's getting retired. And that's exactly what happened. And this is a new one that we built from scratch, all brand new material. That's a brand new one. So the old one, again, it's either a big risk, because if it dismantles itself, which it will, it'll go through the engine. We got very lucky with a Canopy, that didn't go through the engine, it could have. But if this comes apart, it'll go through the engine, and that'll be dead engine, start again. So that's another big risk. It's not our risk anymore, but it's a big risk. And there's other things around the hull, little things again, like the igniters. We spent countless hours on the igniters. Clever Barry wound them and rewound them 4 times. And the points, the little points in them, little tremblers, and they would stick. So Barry put platinum points in, so they wouldn't stick. But if you don't run them for any length of time, you switch them on and they don't work. We used to cycle them every week to make sure they were happy. And if they don't work, you've got to have them in bits and reset the points with your feeler blades and all the rest of it, all this sort of thing. And it's a faff. And it's also one of those things that you have a feel for, and you only start to get it right once you've done it a few times. Otherwise it'll go for a bit and stop. And you can't access them with the engine in. Well, you can, but you need an extra joint in your arm about here. So that's another thing, has to be properly working before the engine goes in, like the hydraulics, leak-free, tested, etc. I mean, they could, I suppose, do away with that and put some cracker boxes in, so when you press the button, instead of going zzz and starting like it did in 66, 67, it goes crack, crack, crack. That sounds awful. Part of the whole thing is to have the sights, the sounds, the smells. And that also applies to the air start. You know, everybody wants to hear the scream of the starter and the whoosh of air and the condensation out the top, the engine spooling up in seconds very violently. You don't want some weak, low pressure hairdryer thing that, you know, it's not the same. It's all part of the package. So a lot of work to be done. Another small thing is the hull. None of the lids fastened down. It was all on riv nuts when we did it, which was, it was a bit of a, I don't know, a bit of a lash up, let's say, to make sure we got the beaut. But they were all taken out, and we were well through the exercise of fitting everything up with quarter turn fasteners. But we never got to finish that exercise. Some of it has quarter turn fasteners, some of it has nothing at all. But before it ever goes near the water, it needs all of that dealt with. Every last detail of that dealt with. You've got to have all the lids fastened down and the gaps closed, because the way the jet pipe cools itself, you've got an inner and outer jet pipe on the engine, and it draws air through the gap between the two jet pipes, and it creates a negative pressure in the hull. And there's so much water flying around, if there's so much as a millimetre gap, it just pulls water in. So it ingests a huge amount of water when it's running, and you've got to pump that out. So if you've got your bilge full of kerosene and oil and all the other things, and you pump it out because you have to, because you're all the way at yon end of the lake and you're taking on water and you cannot wait for somebody to come with a spill boom, you're going to pump all that into the lake. It's manageable, but you've got to understand it and manage it. And this was one of the things on FAD that they were very strict about. Yeah, I mean, on Loch FAD, we were told in no uncertain terms, we were not going to put oil or anything else into that lock. Verboten. And we had spill booms and water treatment and spill kit, all sorts of stuff. And we had to live by that. We were told we're not going to do that. Now somebody is going to say exactly the same about Coniston. You know, you cannot just pump a pint of kerosene over the wall because you don't want it. You can't just pump your spare hydraulic oil over the wall because you haven't solved the leak problem. It's not an option. Well, it wasn't an option for us. Maybe Coniston can swallow it and make it go away. Loch FAD wasn't going to have that. All things to consider. Because, and this is important, because it's important, there is no excuse on this earth, none whatsoever, to turn out a boat in less than the condition we had it to, or could have brought it to. There's no excuse, because there's the experience, there's the expertise, there's the equipment, the knowledge, the whole database of everything we did. It's all here, it's all intact, it's all available. It just needs somebody to ask, and the boat can be to that standard. Now, if they don't want to ask us, fair enough, but they better not dare turn out half a job, because there's no excuse for that. And if you want to boil it down to one simple factor that ought to make the big difference, it's safety. It's a dangerous machine. Turn out half a job, you've just baked in risks you needn't have baked in. Don't listen to the experts, you've baked in risks. Don't take on the experience or the data, you've baked in risks. Why? Why would you do that? Anyway. And then we get to the enormous elephant in the room. They're talking about running this thing next May. Now it's October at the minute, and at the present time it's still sat in the museum with no canopy or any of the other bits I've mentioned. They're about putting it in the water next May. So all of these things have to be done before it ever takes to the water again. But here's the best bit. What use is May? You know, we were always steadfast, we'd not run outside of the school holidays. We need the kids to come along. We want to educate, inspire, entertain. We want to get the next generation to have a look. If you do it in May, the kids are in school, the parents are locked into the school run. If they take their kids out of school, they'll likely get fined in this modern age. So if it happens in May, who's it for? You know, we went to Butte in August, kids were there. I mean, we had dates to run, 19th or 29th of July, when the kids could come. There's no excuse for this May thing. We went to the Park Authority with all our risk assessments and documents and a proven track record and fresh off a successful mission to Butte and said we can do this. And they said, yes, you can, and they gave us dates. And the reason that was cancelled was because the people at the Coniston end had nothing ready. We couldn't tell them which roads to close, where to put portaloos, which fields to park cars in, how to make sure you could always get an ambulance or a fire engine or a police car in, where you could land a helicopter. All this stuff, that was all on their side of the table. And they hadn't done any of it. So the reason Bluebird has not run on Coniston Water to this day is because they cancelled it. That's by the by. So what about running it in May? No excuse. May is useless. That's a fail. Sorry, but May is a fail if the kids can't go. You see, it's a massive, massive logistical exercise. It took us 18 months to get Butte organised, and that was with everybody pulling in the same direction. That included Argyll and Butte Council, Strathclyde Police, the Environmental Agency of Scotland, the local school for the parking, the fire brigade, the air ambulance, you name it, everybody pulling. It took 18 months. And these jobs just grow and grow and grow. Suddenly you find yourself, oh, well, we're going to need a marshal on that corner in case people block this and not get a fire engine. Safety boats, where we're going to park the trailer, how we're going to feed the crew, where we're going to house them. We need fuel for this and fuel for... And it just grows and grows and grows. There's 1 million people live within an hour of Coniston. It's going to be a massive, massive job. And there's no time to do it between now and next May. It's just not going to happen. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this, and watch it we shall. Because as somebody once said to me, you know, somebody said, oh, it's a shame the Bluebird Project's over. It's never going to be over, because it's actually one of the Coniston locals, one of the elders of the village said to me, now you're involved, it'll never be over. There'll always be the next anniversary. So we'll speak at the next point of interest, which is very likely to be May next year, if not before. So I'll see you then. Back to the RS200.